Hi, well, I'm making this video to share with you an experience that I had last year, and I would say that this was probably my biggest insight of the year. I attend every year, I've done for the last 3 years now, an event called Spoonfest. And Spoonfest is an international gathering of greenwood spoon carvers. Some people might call us bodgers or whittlers, but essentially we carve spoons out of green wood. And this is a hobby that I took up about just over 3 years ago, after attending a greenwood craft day that I'd bought as a gift and attended myself with a good friend of mine in the Lake District, and we both made some stools. I made a whiskey stool, so I can sit on that stool next to my fire and drink my whiskey, and my friend, he made a piano stool, which he absolutely loves sitting on to this day, because he realised that he made that stool himself, and there's some great satisfaction in that, isn't there? Anyway, I attended the Spoonfest after getting quite interested in greenwood carving, and I booked in to spend pre-fest, which is 3 days before the main 3-day festival. And those 3 days you get to choose to work with a very talented and proficient spoon carver. Now, I didn't even know that spoon carving even existed before I did this initial sort of greenwood workshop a few years ago. But when I did, I was just transfixed at the amount of enthusiasm and the incredible range of different spoons and woods that could be carved. And so I booked myself in to have 3 days working with, it turned out to be the organiser's daughter. And the organiser, the co-organiser of Spoonfest, Robin Wood, his daughter, Jojo Wood, she has been spoon carving since she was a little girl. And I thought, well, there's going to be something to learn there, isn't there? Working with somebody who's been living and breathing this through her childhood and now into her adult life. And I thought, what a great opportunity that would be. And so I booked in for Jojo's class, and there was 10 of us in total in the class, and that class involves us sitting around in a circle on hay bales with a wooden block in front of us so we can axe out the initial blank of the spoon, and then we can sit and carve it or whittle it, whatever you want to call it, with our sharp knives, our hook knives and our strike knives. And we did an exercise the first day. And on that first day, the exercise was to carve a spoon but not get too attached to it, because Jojo told us that we would be cutting that spoon in half after lunch, after we'd eaten our lunch with that spoon. We were all a bit mortified, to be honest, because, putting the effort into carving a spoon, well, you kind of get attached to it. But she said it was going to be an exercise in non-attachment, which I found quite fascinating as an idea. And so we all carved our spoons. Now, bearing in mind, the 10 people that were there in that class, we were all of very differing skill levels. Now, I've probably carved about 100 spoons in my spoon carving life. There were some people there who had carved a lot more, and there were some people who had never carved a spoon. There was a gentleman sat next to me who had all the gear, and yet he was one of those people that would tell you beforehand that it wasn't going to work out well. Kind of self-deprecation and insecurity about what he was doing. So it was a real mixture of characters and capabilities. And once we'd carved that spoon and we'd ate our lunch with it, and then we cut it in half, the idea was to look at the profile and to see if we could improve the profile, if it could do with thinning out or if we needed more strength in it. It was a really good exercise and I enjoyed it. Well, the next day, Jojo upped the ante. She said, Today we're going to be doing an exercise. Again, I don't want you to get attached to what you're going to be carving, because on the floor are 11 billets of wood. Now, a billet of wood is a slice of wood taken from a log. So it could be that the log is just split down the middle and then split into quarters or into eighths. And she said there's 11 billets of wood on the floor. I just want you to pick up a billet and sit there with them on your axing block, ready to use your carving axe. And she said, I'm going to give you instructions, and those instructions are going to be, I want you to start carving with the axe, start shaping the billet with the axe, but you're only going to get 5 minutes. And then once 5 minutes is up, I'm going to call time, and you're going to move that billet onto the next person. And we're going to keep doing that for about 10 goes. And so the time started, and everyone started axing away at their billets, and then before we knew it, 5 minutes was up and we had to pass that billet to the next person. And so we had another piece of wood that had been partially carved with an axe in front of us. And so once again the 5 minutes started, and we got on and we started to shape the axe. And before long, what we started seeing in front of us was starting to look a little bit more like a spoon. Now, bearing in mind that we all have different preferences and tastes, and we all had different, qualities of knives, of sharpness and everything else. So it was a real mishmash. And what I started to see in front of me was quite amazing, because every time a spoon that was evolving, that was developing, got past me, I was really impressed with the quality of it. And we continued, and after 10 rounds, so after 50 minutes, Jojo told us to stop, and she said, right, I want you to look at what's in front of you. She said, you haven't got the original piece of wood that you started with in front of you, but you've got something that resembles a spoon. And we all agreed that we did. So she said, let's have 2 more rounds of 5 minutes. So she started the clock again. We did 5 minutes, and then another 5 minutes. And then she asked us to put those spoons all in a circle in the middle of those hay bales and to stand round them. And I'm going to share that image now on the screen. So as you can see, 11 spoons, because Jojo was part of it, 11 spoons on the floor in 60 minutes, 1 hour, to create 11 incredible looking spoons. Now, just to give you a bit of context, for me to carve a spoon like that usually would take me about 2 to 3 hours. For somebody who was very competent, then they might be able to do a spoon in just less than an hour. Someone who's never carved a spoon, well, they could be at it all day, and the quality of it might be quite questionable as to whether it was a spoon or not, or a piece of wood the dog had brought in. But what we were looking at on the floor was 11 beautiful pieces of work, pieces of art, in my opinion. And what Jojo said was, what you're witnessing there is non-attachment to the outcome. You all just got on with what you were doing, and you weren't attached to it, and so you just got on with it. And I found that absolutely fascinating. And we all got to keep the spoon that we ended up with, which was great, and I was quite proud of that. Well, it was a group effort, but there was a real sense of, this is my spoon, and this has been quite an experience. And then I walked back to my tent, because it's a camping festival as well. And I walked back to my tent, and as I'm walking back to my tent, I had a realisation, I had an insight. And that insight was that, well, we'd all experienced a little bit of magic. And that magic was that not only were we not attached to the outcome, the spoon we were working on, but we weren't attached to our thinking during that exercise. In fact, I'll go as far as to say that we dropped out of thought. When I say thought, I mean we dropped out of any critical thinking, we dropped out of any comparison thinking, we dropped out of our opinions, we dropped out of our insecurities, and we dropped out of any real analytical thinking. We all just got really, really creative. And when you drop out of your thinking and you go into that calm, creative space, something really, really magical happens. And that's what I witnessed there. And, well, my conclusion was that thinking is a really, really redundant exercise. Incredibly redundant. Because if you'd have taken the average of the skills of the people there, those 11 people, and you'd have worked out that if we'd all have been given a billet of wood and said, right, all of you, get on with making a spoon, then probably most people would finish after about 3 hours, and there would be still some people working on it at maybe 6 hours. So if you had to put all them hours, maybe 35, 40 hours to create what we saw in front of us, and all of that was done in 1 hour, effortlessly. And we're all feeling really, really good about it, really proud about it. And so the redundancy of thinking, that thinking is really overrated. And that when we drop out of our comparison trap and our self-judgment and our procrastination and all of those things, when we drop out of that, we get access to something absolutely amazingly profound, creative. We get clarity and we get a good feeling. And that was my biggest insight of 2025, without any doubt, that thinking is very much a redundant exercise. There are times when we need to think, and we need to pay attention to what we're thinking about, and it might be that we're more analytical and critical, and we might be comparing and we might be judging things, and sometimes that can be useful. But in that exercise, it demonstrated that when we drop all of that and we're not attached to our thinking, that we become so incredibly efficient and creative. And that was just wonderful. And it's made me realise that there are times in life when I can be really lost in my thinking and it's not efficient at all. Not only is it not efficient, it is not inspiring, it's not clear, it's not helpful. It's not helpful to me or the people around me. And it's made me stop and pause and ask me if I really am being, well, mindful about what I'm doing, or if I'm getting lost in thought. And what a wonderful gift that is. Quite unexpected. So my idea of working with someone who I thought might be one of the most talented young spoon carvers possibly in the world, turns out that Jojo gave me a completely different gift as well, and that was the insight into the redundancy of thinking. So thanks, Jojo, and thank you for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you all real soon.